Hello and welcome to the Ravens Brawl podcast, a part of the Brawl Network, episode number 11. Joe, we've hit the double-digit mark. I'm your host, Dave Steinwettle. Pleased to be with you. We actually have Ravens football to watch this week. I'm excited. Hopefully, we'll be excited Sunday morning after watching the Ravens-Titans game. I got to introduce my co-host, Joe Schiller. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. We have to be doing something well. If we reach double digits, they would have kicked us off by now. So it's very exciting to be here, and we have a very special guest on today. So I'm really excited about that.
We'll get to that in a moment. I'm just going to say the FCC hasn't listened to the show yet. So we got that going for us that they haven't listened in yet. But we got some new, real quick news. We have T-shirts available. You can go to dsgn.tree.com. I probably botched that. But you can get Ravens Brawl T-shirts and hoodies online, Joe. I know you're big into wearing the apparel stuff, so we got to start plugging away at the T-shirt sales. But I'll turn it over to you to introduce our great guest this week.
Yep, this week we have on Sarah Ellison. You can find her on Twitter at SG Ellison. She is a former Ravens editor, creator of Man of the Crowd podcast, and author of Late for Work that I've been so graciously been able to co-author this season. So Sarah, first of all, how are you doing tonight? And it's very exciting to have you on today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. I just feel like this has taken forever. It's going to be like 3 weeks since we see Lamar Jackson in the starters. So I'm just sitting here waiting around, ready for the excitement.
Yeah, I think we all are. It's been another bye week, and I think we've all just been ready for some football on Saturday, so we're very excited about that. The first thing we kind of wanted to dive into was some talk about Lamar Jackson and his All-Pro vote. He was voted first-team All-Pro and received 47 of the 50 votes there. That wasn't really the newsworthy item that came out of that. It was actually one of the voters who didn't vote for Lamar Jackson, which was Bill Polian. If you've heard that name, you know he's been kind of a longtime critic of Lamar Jackson. Coming out of college, he said that Lamar was too short and that he should convert to wide receiver. He admitted publicly that he was wrong on that take this season, but it is notable that he did vote for Russell Wilson as his first team All-Pro vote. So, Sarah, I just wanted to kind of ask you, and it's been brought up on Twitter and a lot of discussion about it. What's your kind of opinion on this, and do you think this is really kind of Ravens fans making a lot more out of it than it really is?
It is being made too much of. I mean, everybody's, allowed to have their opinions. And I think the fact that he was one of the big names that said that Lamar Jackson should convert to wide receiver, that then him not voting for, Lamar for MVP. I think the two together is what makes it so big. And like you said, he apologized, or he kind of came and said, I was wrong. Obviously, there's nothing else he can say. He was wrong about Lamar converting. And so I think it's more about, like, everybody's upset about this, more like some old school football guys that are just, stuck in the traditional drop back passer. And so anybody that is stuck in those ways, it's almost like, Ravens fans, they're here for Lamar. They are here to protect him. I'm a big advocate for Lamar, and I've even seen people come after me. I mean, the Lamar defenders are loud and strong. So I think it's both. And I think that there's, the history of the black quarterback that also kind of plays into it, that brings a little bit more anger. I don't know Bill Polian personally, and you can't really fault him. I mean, Russell Wilson has done well. To me, obviously, if I had a vote, I would vote for Lamar. But you can't hate on him voting for Russell Wilson, in my opinion. I think it's more just that it's the two things together, him saying he should have converted to wide receiver, and this history of a black quarterback kind of breaking out and wanting some of these old school guys to come on board with that way of thinking.
Yeah, Ravens Twitter is very interesting because there was a lot of defense up to Joe Flacco coming before he was traded to the Denver Broncos, and that's translated over to everyone being very defensive of Lamar, and rightfully so with all the criticism he's received. And Dave, you've been a guy who's had criticism of Lamar Jackson, obviously not to the point like a lot of people do, but you've had your doubts, and a lot of people did coming into the draft of, can he be a polished passer? Can he be a guy who translates success to the NFL? What's your kind of take on this whole thing with Bill Polian and Lamar?
Well, first thing, it's hard to admit when you're wrong, and I think that's what Bill Polian's dealing with a little bit. It's hard to admit you're wrong and get basically shown every week that you're wrong on a national stage with what Lamar Jackson does, but I think what this comes down to, and Joe, when we talked about the MVP race a couple weeks ago, I thought this would be a deciding factor and why people might pick Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has a larger body of work where people say, okay, he's got a proven track record. Lamar Jackson, what he's doing this year, I think there's some skepticism among people. Well, this might just be a one-year thing. I'm going to go with Russell because I know Russell has the proven track record. As great as what Lamar is doing, it's only 1 year. Maybe in year 2 or 3, I'll vote for him if he's still doing it. But I'd rather choose the guy that's got a proven track record. And honestly, I think that's what Bill Polian was thinking was, I'll go with the guy that has a proven track record against the guy that, to him, it feels like a gimmick.
Well, just to add to that, sorry, Joe, but the voting is about this season. It's not about sustainability. And so that's where I think some stubbornness on Bill Polian's part is coming in, if that's indeed his reasoning, because it is about this season and this season alone.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then there were 2 other people who did not vote for Lamar Jackson as well, 2 guys who host Sirius XM radio for the NFL there. And I believe if I was listening to the audio, one of them it sounded like voted for Russell Wilson because he knew Lamar Jackson was going to be the runaway vote for the MVP. And to take away nothing from Russell Wilson, he's had a fantastic season. But when you look at the body of work this season and the 2 players played each other head-to-head in Seattle, Lamar Jackson completely outplayed Russell Wilson in that aspect. And on the bigger stage, Lamar has just had a better body of work in prime time compared to some very common opponents that Russell Wilson has had this season. So it's definitely an interesting discussion. And I'm not sure if any of us really have any qualms or doubts that Lamar is going to be the MVP this season. But transitioning to one of the guys who helped Lamar to this MVP run has been offensive coordinator Greg Roman. He's being heavily rumored still with the Cleveland Browns in their open head coaching position. The Browns have not made a decision yet. Roman officially did interview there, but there are a lot of other candidates that have been mentioned, including Josh McDaniels, Eagles defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, Niners defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, and Vikings offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski. Sarah, I wanted to ask you about this. The Browns look like they want to make a decision coming to the end of the week. A lot of the national pundits were reporting. So how much of a fit do you think Greg Roman could be with the Cleveland Browns? And if he does leave, who could you see potentially as a replacement? And then one more thing I wanted to add on to that is if Greg Roman does leave and the Ravens have had some inconsistency with offensive coordinators throughout the years, could we see a drop-off, or do you have confidence in the in-house staff to potentially step up if this is a scenario?
Okay, well, from the first question of whether he's a fit, I mean, from Greg Roman's point of view, he wants to be a head coach, as most assistant coaches want. I don't know why that wouldn't be anybody's goal. And the Cleveland Browns are the only team left with an NFL vacancy, head coaching vacancy. So it's definitely a fit from his end. And I say that because I know that a lot of fans are like, oh, he should just stay. He's got Lamar Jackson. Who wants to go to the Browns with that history where they just keep turning over head coaches? But I mean, Greg's been at this for 25 years. There are only 32 of these positions in the world. And it's usually the Browns that come open every couple of years. So you kind of got to take your chances where they're given to you. But I'm guessing your question is more about, the personnel side and organizational fit. I think that Greg Roman, whenever he's been an offensive coordinator, his the rushing attack is almost always in the top 10. Most times it was in the top 4. Do I think he could replicate that, be a top 5 rushing offense with Nick Chubb? No doubt. No doubt he could do that. The other question is because he has such a history of leading offenses with these dual threats. So you got Colin Kaepernick, Tyrod Taylor, and now Lamar Jackson. He hasn't really given the chance to be with a guy like Baker Mayfield. And Baker can run, but obviously he's no Lamar or these other guys. So he's kind of unproven in that sense. Now, that doesn't mean he's not capable. He just hasn't had that chance. But to me, Greg Roman, there's so many things stick out about him, but there's 3 that really stick out to me. It's this ability to build an offense that is tailor-made and fits around the skill sets of his players. I mean, you get Baker, you get Nick Chubb, you've got OBJ, you've got so much talent on paper. I think that Greg Roman could bring that to the field. His creativity, second to none. And then his play calling. There's some guys that just know offenses, the X's and O's. But Greg Roman has this magic touch in the heat of the battle to know how to counter these moves that the defenses are giving him. So I think all those are transferable. I think he could fit there. To me, it's more a decision on the Browns. I don't know that side of it as well. I'm not plugged in. I think all of us are more on the Raven side. If what the Browns media are saying, it doesn't seem like Greg Roman's even really in the top 3 of favorites. I mean, who knows? Media can be wrong. The Giants surprise people. So to me, it's more, do the Browns want him over other people? But I think he could definitely fit there.
Yeah, he's a guy that has had just a ton of success, and we give the Ravens credit for not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, especially with Lamar Jackson, since he is such a unique talent. But Dave, we touched on this a little bit as well. What's your kind of take on this compared to some of the guys like Josh McDaniels, who, if you read Twitter and follow along with a lot of these things, feel like he could be a top candidate for the Browns. How do you see Greg Roman in this comparing to a lot of these guys that are also interviewing a potential head coaching candidates?
Well, I tell you this much: the way this coaching cycle's gone, Greg Roman isn't going to be the coach of the Cleveland Browns because everybody's hired a head coach based off the first interview. And Greg Roman had his interview a week ago. I mean, Joe Judge blew away the Giants in his only interview. Matt Rule took one interview with the Panthers, and that was only because the Giants didn't hire him. And Mike McCarthy did so well, he slept over at Jerry Jones's house. So, to me, he didn't obviously blow the Cleveland Browns away in the first interview that makes them go, wow, okay, this is the guy we need to hire as the next head coach. Does that mean that they couldn't go back and hire him a second time? No, but I think it's unlikely. But I think you look at his offenses and kind of to Sarah's point, he's used a lot of dual threat quarterbacks, and you don't really have that in Baker Mayfield. You have 2 really great running backs and 2 really great receivers. I think it would be a very fun pairing in Cleveland with Greg Roman, but obviously to me, he didn't wow the Cleveland Browns in his interview, or he would probably be hired as the Cleveland Browns' next head coach, the way everything has gone and what the Browns are looking for.
It's the Haslams are very unpredictable, and I don't think many of us expected them to fire John Dorsey as the general manager either, but if they're going to be starting a blank slate, you're going to fire your head coach and general manager. It's ideal because if you are bringing a new coach, you probably want to bring in a new regime as well. Sarah, the Ravens have a lot of coordinators in-house that have been very touted and very sought after in this organization, including James Urban, wide receivers coach David Culley, and tight ends coach Bobby Ingram, who've also played an integral part in this offense this season. If Greg Roman does leave, do you see the Ravens potentially targeting an in-house replacement like this? It seems like that's kind of been their MO. They did it on the defensive side with Wink, and then obviously Greg Roman too stepping in.
Yeah.
What's kind of your opinion on this?
Yeah, I mean, especially under John Harbaugh, I went back and looked. All of the defensive coordinators that John Harbaugh promoted were in-house. In terms of offensive coordinators, I mean, he brought Cam Cameron in with him, but he had 4 changes after that. 2 of them were external, 2 were internal. Both the internals were quarterbacks coaches being promoted to offensive coordinator. So that's the history of it. And given the history and looking at the internal candidates, James Urban sticks out to me the most. James Urban has built a very good rapport with Lamar Jackson. You think about how far Lamar Jackson has come as a passer from last year to this year. Obviously, massive credit goes to Lamar himself. But James Urban has overseen that. And he's helped him. I mean, you go back to some of the press conferences throughout the year of Lamar Jackson talking about what changed, and he talked about fundamentals and the technique, getting a wider base, showing patience in the pocket, and he credits a bit of that to James Urban. He said, "Hey, I'm all in. I love Coach Urban." That to me seems like a very just natural fit. And on top of that, I think because you had asked, will the Ravens be hurt if Roman left? The thing that would concern me the most is that in-game play calling magic that some people just seem to have, and I think Roman has that. Urban, Coley, you mentioned. Those guys don't have that experience as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, so that's an unknown. That doesn't mean that they can't be good, but so that part is an unknown. But they have the same philosophy. I mean, James Urban was brought in just a couple of months before Lamar Jackson was drafted. He's been here for the complete offensive rebuild. He was a part of that. He was a part of that with Roman. So with Harbs, let's say Urban gets promoted. You've got Eric DeCosta and you've got Lamar Jackson. I'm still feeling really good about this offense with if those were the guys in charge. I mean, Lamar Jackson is the X factor, but that is that the play calling is the part that I'd be a little bit concerned about losing.
Sarah, I think you're absolutely right. James Urban to me would be the logical choice because he's the guy, if you watch during the games, that Greg Roman relays the play to talk to Lamar Jackson. So he already understands some of the verbiage and all the offensive philosophies that Roman wants to have because he has to relay that in the game to Lamar Jackson from Greg Roman sitting up in the booth. So he's already used to that play calling mentality. And from that coaching side, if you're calling out those plays every play, you're kind of in sync with the coordinator. So I wouldn't be as worried about maybe the in-game stuff because Urban kind of, during that play, they're talking to each other. They're saying, hey, all right, Greg, I see this from here. Or, James, what are you seeing down there? Maybe we should call this on this play, or maybe we should go that route. So I think if James Urban is smart, he's learning kind of in the moment that sort of what you do as a play caller. And look, it isn't an exact science. I'll be the first to tell you, being a coordinator, it's not that easy. But I think James Urban could do it, and I think he could do it effectively to where there's a minimal difference between James Urban's play calling and Greg Roman's if this ends up happening. Joe, you want to hop in?
I agree with both of you just to the point that James Urban would be the most logical fit. I guess I'm just selfish when it comes to consistency because when you see how well Lamar's playing, you love the pairing with Greg Roman. You just would love to see both of them just continue to grow together. But with success comes opportunities. And just seeing Joe Flacco throughout the years, at times he had his criticisms, but he never had really a consistent offensive coordinator. When you saw this kind of almost similar to a sense with Gary Kubiak with a great season, he went and got a head coaching gig. It happens. Jim Caldwell got a head coaching gig. With coordinators having success, they're going to get opportunities and looks from other teams. It's just the nature of the NFL. The Ravens aren't the only team to suffer from that. Kind of want to transition here a little bit too, heading into Sunday's game. There's a lot of news around Mark Ingram. He hasn't practiced since getting injured in the Week 16 game against the Cleveland Browns. He didn't practice yesterday. He didn't practice today. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport said there's a chance he could play. If not, we're looking at Gus Edwards, who would assume the starting role, and Justice Hill would be the primary backup. Sarah, how effective do you think this run game can be against the Titans if Mark Ingram doesn't play? We saw a glimpse of it against the Steelers in Week 17, who were, no joke, a very good defense, and they were playing for something there, and you didn't have Lamar Jackson in that game. But Edwards is a starting running back, hypothetically, on Saturday. What's your confidence level at?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer Mark Ingram, but my confidence level is just about as high as it can be for any backup coming in. You spoke to I mean, Gus Edwards had a great year last year, and he's had to take a step back with the Ravens signing Mark Ingram, but then you saw against the Steelers, and the Steelers, I think, have a better defense than the Tennessee Titans, and they had stuff on the line. They were trying to win and get into the playoffs. So against what I believe is a better defense, the Ravens trot out RG3, so Lamar Jackson's not even on the field. Then you trot out Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, and with all those backups, the Ravens still put up more than 200 yards rushing. So it's a credit to the players. I think it's also a credit back to Roman, to his scheme, those pre-snap motions he's got on, the disguises he has. It's hard on any defense. And then so now you're going to put Gus Edwards in and Justice Hill with Lamar Jackson back in, and RG3 played well, but again, Lamar's just on another level. So I have tremendous amount of confidence that whether Ingram can play or not, that the Ravens will still be able to run the ball. The one thing that makes me slightly nervous, and it's not even that big, it's the ball security. Gus Edwards has the same amount of fumbles, which is just 2 this season, that Mark Ingram has had. And Mark Ingram has had a lot more snaps. So to me, the only way the Titans can really stay in this game and potentially win it is through turnovers. That's been what the Titans have given up a lot of yards, but they've had a lot of turnovers on defense. So to me, priority number one, if it's Gus Edwards taking the starting role, it's securing the football.
Dave, I'll ask you this real quick. Say Mark Ingram plays, but he's not 100%. If you're the Ravens, are you still trotting him out there at that, or are you still having trust in Gus Edwards and Justice Hill to take over that role?
Well, Joe, I want to make this point before I answer your question. Is there any injuries on the offensive line this week, Joe?
Not that I know of, if I've checked.
No injuries to the offensive line. Everybody's freaking out about not having Mark Ingram. I'd be more worried if one of the 5 offensive linemen wasn't there, because this offensive line is so dominant. They've blown holes against every defensive line that they have faced. So, they could run the 3 of us out there at running back with that offensive line. And I swear, you guys might get a little further than I would, but we would still get about 5 yards per carry because that offensive line is so dominant. So I'm not worried about whether it's Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, or my grandmother running behind that offensive line. If the offensive line is healthy, I've yet to see a team be able to stack up against it. But, Joe, I forgot your question. Could you say it again?
Yeah, no worries. That's a great point. Say Mark Ingram's out there, and by the way it looks this week, if he is playing on Saturday, this is just my guess that he wouldn't be 100%. If you're the Ravens, are you still trotting him out there on the field if he's not 100%, or are you still putting your trust into Gus Edwards and Justice Hill to carry that load?
Here's the problem. We're not in week 10 of the season where you can say, okay, let's save him for the stretch. You're not guaranteed to win this football game. I know the Ravens are a top seed. They're the better team. They should win this game. You're not guaranteed. If Mark Ingram can give you anything, Mark Ingram has to play. That's plain and simple. It sucks. It sounds kind of barbaric, but that's what happens in the playoffs. So if he can give you 50% of the snap carries alongside Gus Edwards, I'm taking that 50% if I'm John Harbaugh, because that 50% is better than not having the 50% of Mark Ingram. So if he can play he's playing on Saturday.
Yeah, I just have to say I agree. This is like you lose, you go home. So save him for what? I like the confidence, but I'm with you. I mean, this is do or die time. You bring out all your weapons, everything you can, and you make sure you win this week. And then if you make it to the next week, then you deal with that then.
The Titans are the number 6 seed, but the way they played up in Foxborough last week, they're a dangerous team. And I agree with both of your points that this is not a guarantee for the Ravens, despite when you look at the spread, despite playing at M&T Bank Stadium. There's going to be some concerns, and this is not a game that they can just walk over the Titans. I don't think anyone's thinking that to this point, but we'll jump into a little bit of positional matchups. So I want to ask you maybe 1 or 2 positional matchups you're looking forward to watching, and then who's your X factor for this game on Saturday night that Ravens fans should be looking for?
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be watching Derrick Henry. And the matchup I'm specifically looking for, I mean, I feel pretty good about when he runs up the middle to Brandon. I mean, the rest that Brandon Williams and Michael Pierce has had, I feel like they're going to be, Derrick Henry is going to get his, but I feel pretty confident inside. So I'm more looking at Derrick Henry when he goes to the Ravens edge defenders. Henry, let's see, ESPN put out this stat last week. He had 182 yards against the Patriots. 26 of the yards were inside, 156 were outside. Now, the Ravens ended the season pretty well as the number 5 ranked run defense, but they've been gashed, and they've been gashed on the outside. They're actually number 20 in yards per rush. And so I think it's helped this rushing defense that the Ravens offense controls the clock for so long, and they get out to leads. And so the opposing offenses usually have to pass to try to catch back up. They can't run as much. So Derrick Henry, I think the way the Ravens take him out is do what they've done all season and jump out to a lead to make sure that the ball goes into Ryan Tannehill's hands to try to force him to win with his arm. And I think we're going to see a lot more. I think Ferguson, who's improved throughout the year, I think he's been one of the main culprits on the outside. And then during that San Francisco game where they just kept attacking him. The Ravens put in Jihad Ward. So I think you'll see more of him. I think you'll see more of Josh Bynes, more of LJ Fort to really focus in on Derrick Henry, because just like Earl Thomas, who was, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He said, if they can stop the run, then the play action won't be as effective. And Ryan Tannehill, I'm with Earl Thomas. I just don't think it'll go in their favor if that's what they have to rely on to beat the Ravens. So if you can slow down Derrick Henry, I think you've got a great. I think the Ravens could really run away with this game.
I think Wake Martindale said it best, saying that Derrick Henry's a guy that your kids create on Madden. He is just, I think, that big, and we saw him paired and set next to Mark Ingram in one of the Alabama championship games back in the day, and you look at that picture, you just realize how big he is. Dave, what's your positional matchup to watch going into Saturday night?
It's Derrick Henry going to be one-on-one with the Ravens linebackers, and can Raven linebackers make the tackle in the open field? That is what the Patriots couldn't do. That's what a lot of teams don't want to do against Derrick Henry because he's so big, he's so strong. It's crazy, but even at the pro level, I think there's a level of intimidation for some of these smaller defensive players that go, oh my God, this guy's coming at me. I got to try to make a play. And you see poor tackling, poor technique. So it's the Raven linebackers and really the Raven defense as a whole. Can you just tackle the guy? Because he gets so many yards after contact. He's one of the best backs in the league at yards after the contact, and it's not hard to figure that out. So the Ravens have to be able to make those tackles one-on-one with Derrick Henry. If they do, like Sarah said, the play action won't be there. I mean, Tannehill, when he didn't have the play action against the Patriots, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. It was that bad at times. So take Derrick Henry, and can you make your tackles in space?
The one point I had, and you both can comment on what you think about this, to me, the X factor is how Marlon Humphrey matches up against Derrick Henry on the outside, because Dave and I have talked about this a little bit, about the cornerback tackling. And in my opinion, I just don't think Earl Thomas at this stage of his career is going to be that guy making that play. And Marcus Peters is just not that guy either. Marlon Humphrey is one of the most physical cornerbacks that's able to meet a running back or a ball carrier at the line of scrimmage. I think he's going to factor into that outside game if Derrick Henry is running and having success on the outside, because the Ravens can't allow a guy like him to get to the second level, because we saw what he could do against the Patriots and he ran all over them. Another guy I wanted to point to that the Ravens will have to keep an eye out for is A.J. Brown. He's had an explosive season, likely going to be the Offensive Rookie of the Year, 1,051 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. So Sarah and Dave, I just want to kind of get your thoughts on any other players that the Ravens should be looking for, or any X factors you guys have going into Saturday.
I mean, in terms of X factor, I mean, I go more on the Ravens offensive side. I know you're asking about stopping them, but to me, it's always Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson. And by the way, I agree with your point on the cornerbacks. I was going to bring that up myself on their tackling. Marcus Peters, Humphrey, all of them. And A.J. Brown will be a big person to stop. But again, back to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, I think, is still carrying in a good way, in a motivational way, that loss to the Chargers. He's been hearing for a year about how he just struggled for 3 quarters and couldn't hardly do anything. He talked earlier this week, or was it last week, about how that is still eating at him. I think that even if things go bad for the Ravens, the turnovers, things like that, stuff on special teams, I think Lamar Jackson would put this team on his back and carry him over the finish line. And I think one thing that works in the Ravens' advantage, I know a lot of people didn't want the Ravens to face the Titans coming into the divisional round. One thing that the Ravens have going for them is that the Titans haven't seen him before. And you can study all you want. You can get the scout, the Lamar Jackson impersonators on the scout team. It's a whole other level when you're out there. And I think this Tennessee defense could be in for a rude awakening when they face him.
Joe, I don't care about any of the other Titan offensive players. They don't matter if Derrick Henry is running the football. So the question, A.J. Brown, okay, nice year. Congratulations. You get a cupcake at the end and a participation trophy. He doesn't matter if number 22 isn't doing anything. So I'm like Sarah. I look offensively. And outside of Lamar Jackson, and Sarah's absolutely right, it's demoralizing to NFL players when they're facing a guy like Lamar Jackson that has another gear that he can go to. And he makes it look so easy. Joe, I told you last week that it's like watching a guy, and I've coached against kids that you think, oh, we got him. We got Lamar Jackson bottled up. And he gets in the open field and he's got that other gear. And you just sit there and go, oh, my God, we have no answer for that. And that's what you've seen NFL teams do. And I bet you Tennessee may have that happen to them on Saturday where they go, oh, my God, we thought we were prepared, but this guy's faster than anybody else we have on the team. But I'm looking at the tight ends. Tennessee is bad against tight ends. They have given up some big games. Mark Andrews, Hayden Hurst, Nick Boyle. I mean, this is smiling on them. This is the matchup they've been waiting for all year. The tight ends can have a huge day, and I think we'll have a huge day for the Ravens.
I was intrigued for this matchup facing the Titans because they were the only team in the AFC playoffs to have not faced Lamar Jackson. And as a defender, I almost feel like you have to be patient when coming up against Lamar Jackson. It seems kind of weird to say because he is so fast, but Lamar Jackson seems to do his best when he gets defenders at their worst time. And as a defender, I feel like you have to be so patient because he's going to wait for a defender to make that move, and then he runs off of it or runs past them, makes another move, and we've seen what he can do. He makes opposing defenders into a Twitter highlight reel. So he is going to be, for me as well, an X factor to watch. I completely agree with both of you. Jumping into some questions that we got on Twitter. One was an early free agent look ahead. I want to kind of shorten it down just for time's sake, but Sarah, I wanted to ask you about two players in particular. The first one being Matthew Judon, who's slated to become an unrestricted free agent this offseason, and then cornerback Jimmy Smith. Both are going to be unrestricted free agents this offseason. Matt Judon's been rumored to potentially the Ravens could potentially use the franchise tag on him. According to Over the Cap, it'd be projected to $16.2 million for linebackers, and that would be a one-year deal. And then Jimmy Smith is also an interesting case because he's been with the team for so long and a veteran cornerback that I think would be great to keep around with this group. But if you're Eric DeCosta and you have decisions on both of these players, what route are you going?
If I cannot reach a deal with Matthew Judon before free agency hits, I would absolutely franchise him. And I say that because what you just pointed out, the franchise tag for him is going to be around $17 million. When you think about this, the Ravens let Zadarius Smith walk last year. I didn't have any qualms with that. He got a contract worth $16.5 million average annually. Okay, so this is the going rate of pass rushers, and the cupboard is nearly bare for the Ravens. And if Matthew Judon goes, the cupboard will be bare. You got some guys that are up and coming, and that's great. But Zadarius Smith, you've got his teammates when he didn't make the Pro Bowl. I thought he had a good chance of doing it with the season he had. You got teammates being like, other Pro Bowl teammates who were like, how did he not make the Pro Bowl? He's the best player on our defense. And I think Matthew Judon is better than Zadarius Smith. So Zadarius Smith finishes the season with 10 sacks and 30 quarterback hits this year, and he made, like I said, his average annual salary is $16.5 million. Judon had 9.5 sacks and 33 quarterback hits. It's right in the same area, and Judon didn't really have anybody on the opposite side helping him. I think Wink Martindale would love it if the Ravens tagged him or signed him to a long-term deal. The only real saving grace for the Ravens in the pass rush is Wink Martindale using the blitz because he has a phenomenally strong secondary. I just don't see any way how the Ravens could let him go, knowing that's anybody else they're going to get of that quality is going to cost just as much. Matthew Judon can make more than the tag if he hits the free agent market. So I would use it as a tool to get a long-term deal. I think Eric DeCosta is going to be very aggressive, but not desperate. I don't think he'll overpay, but I think he'll be very aggressive in trying to keep Matthew Judon here.
The Ravens have only used the franchise tag 3 times in the past decade on Haloti Ngata, Ray Rice, and Justin Tucker. But to your point, coming into this year, you had Judon still there and some up-and-coming guys, so you thought you could potentially bear the weight. But I agree with you that if Judon's gone, you have Jalen Ferguson, who's still kind of finding his own. Tyus Bowser's kind of in that same realm there. And if you're the Ravens, you're going to have a late-round draft pick in the first round, and you're not going to get a Joey Bosa or some guy who can come in right away. And and be productive early, at least in my opinion. Dave, what's your kind of thoughts on this as far as going potential franchise tag on Judon and then keeping Jimmy Smith potentially around in this secondary?
Well, you got to keep Judon because, as Sarah has said and as you have said, you don't have much behind them. And on top of that, you already gonna have to fix your inside linebacker position in free agency or the draft because, as I've said numerous times, you had to go get guys off the street because you didn't have the horses there to begin with. So that's already going to be a need. You don't sign Judon, you're basically telling the fan, hey, folks, I know you may want another receiver, but we don't have linebackers, folks, and we need to go get some. So you're going to have to redo the linebacker room if you don't sign Judon. You're still going to have to do it even if you sign Judon, but it helps to have him at Judon. So I think you got to do everything you can to sign him. And I said it last week. I'm a big Jimmy Smith guy. He's a smart, intelligent football player. He frustrates the hell out of the fans because he's not like Marcus Peters. He's not going to try to jump routes. He plays smart, fundamental football of, okay, I'll give you 8 yards because I don't want to give up the 60 yards if you get by me. I think he's just as important to that Raven defense as Matt Judon because he's another hitter in that secondary. And if you're going to have Earl Thomas and Marcus Peters that like to make business decisions and not always stick their nose in and make the tackle, you need a Jimmy Smith to go along with a Marlon Humphrey or a Chuck Clark or Tony Jefferson that's willing to go make that tackle. So I think you need to keep both. You'll probably get Jimmy Smith back. Judon, if you don't sign Judon, you're telling everybody you're going to go get all new linebackers.
Dave, I've done my fair share of shows with other people, and I feel like I'm always alone in saying to bring back Jimmy Smith. So it's like refreshing. Go. It's refreshing to see. First of all, we're not talking about bringing Jimmy Smith back at the contract that he's been on. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a modest deal for a guy. And let me tell you this. I don't know if you guys caught Jeff Zrebick's article on Jimmy Smith in the Athletic. What he put out there is what I have been preaching for so long. There is something about Jimmy Smith loves the Ravens. If you guys remember, he signed his big deal. It's his second contract that everybody's looking at. That's where they need to cash in. He signed before he hit the free agent market, and he could have made more if he hit it. He has talked repeatedly throughout the years about how the Ravens have had his back, and he really values loyalty. When he came out of the draft, everybody was on him for character flags. He got suspended for some conduct off the field, and the Ravens still stood behind him, obviously encouraging him to become a better person. Through all these injuries, they've been behind him. So he values that loyalty, and I think not only is he going to get a modest deal wherever he kind of goes, but I think he'd even take a little bit more of a modest deal for the Ravens. But it's not just a one-sided thing. It's not just because of loyalty. From the Ravens side, the Ravens defense plays not just better, but significantly better when Jimmy Smith is healthy. And so when you're talking about him as your number 3 cornerback, instead of your number 1, where you're not pumping in as much cap dollars, to me, it makes all the sense in the world to bring him back, even with his injury history, on a modest deal. And I think it could happen because Jimmy loves the Ravens.
People can have a very short-sighted view, and we are a very pro-Jimmy Smith podcast here. I've said the same thing. I think there's a mutual respect. There's a mutual respect between Jimmy and the Ravens, I think, like you said, Sarah, through all of this. And there's no guarantee Brandon Carr's back either, depending if he wants to retire or what's going to go on with that. So you already extended Marcus Peters. You still have Earl Thomas and Marlon Humphrey around next year. I think that could be definitely a loaded group. Another fan question we had on here was asking what the biggest positions of need are heading into the offseason. I think we all agree edge rush is right up there. But, Sarah, if you're going number 2, number 3, you're going into the draft in April, what positions are you targeting and why?
Yeah, my number 3, Davis kind of hit on. It's inside inside linebacker. I think Eric DeCosta has done a phenomenal job of filling in on the fly with Josh Bynes and LJ Fort. But the fact of the matter is they went into the season really betting on Patrick Owasso playing that Mike linebacker role with the green dot, and that did not pan out at all. And really, again, based off of reports, the Ravens had offered Peanut a new contract. You know how Eric DeCosta has been doing. He's been doing it a year early. Will they try to do that with Peanut? And he reportedly turned it down, and he bet on himself. And in this case, it didn't work out. I don't know what the deal was, but I can't imagine that he's going to get much on the open market. And I really feel for him in that sense. But he wasn't the Mike linebacker. He couldn't do the green dot. They gave that to why is my name Chuck Clark. And so they have to. They did sign LJ Fort to an extension, but I still think you have to build around him. So that would be my number 3. Number 1 was pass rusher, as you said, and then number 2 would be interior offensive line. You have to get ready for Marshall Yanda's retirement, whether he does it after this season or the season after that. I think that the Ravens have been fortunate at their center position with Skura and now Patrick McCary. They've both done extremely well this season, but I think part of that is that they're playing next to a future Hall of Famer. And I think the Ravens have to get ready for that and really find another elite interior offensive lineman.
It's interesting because when I named these, I had edge rush number 1, inside linebacker number 3, but my 2 and 4 were flopped. It was wide receiver at number 2 in my opinion, and then interior offensive line at 4. Is wide receiver not being the top 3 for you more the fact that you're confident in the run game, or as well as you're confident in Marquise Hollywood Brown stepping up in year 2 and the guys that the Ravens also have around him? I guess the tight end group could also be included in there because they are a big chunk of that as well.
Well, I think it's more that I think that they could lose Yanda, and I think he's just massive inside. Whereas and the Ravens offense is predicated on that offensive line. I mean, you need to protect Lamar, you need to open holes for him. You need to do he's your bell cow. You got to protect him. And then so the wide receiver game, while I would love for it to improve, it's shown that it's not critical to the offense's success. I mean, they're number 1 in scoring points, number 2 in yardage. You always want to get better, so I would like to see the wide receiver group improved, but I don't think it's as critical to the Ravens' offensive success as the offensive line is.
Dave, you're an offensive line guy. I assume that's probably a big need for you as well.
Well, I put inside linebacker above offensive line, but I agree wholeheartedly. You got to keep investing in the offensive line. There is such bad offensive line play across the league. You have a good one. You want to keep it at a good one. I've said for years that's been the biggest crime of the Dallas Cowboys is they didn't continue to invest in their offensive line, and the results are showing. You can't do that if you're the Ravens. You have to continue to invest in your offensive line. But your linebackers stink. I mean, they stunk coming into the year. I hate to be harsh, but being a defensive coordinator as well as an offensive line guy, these are 2 things I care deeply about, and the linebacker play stunk. And it got a little better with Bynes and Ford, but you got Ford for another year. You probably aren't going to have Bynes back. You need to get some guys in there. And Joe, to your wide receiver point, I also think the Ravens are going to have a hard time getting a receiver that if they don't have the mindset of I'm willing to come in and block. You have to, in this offense, have receivers that are willing to block the cornerbacks, and that's just not a lot of wide receivers today. They want to be the flashy 50-yard receptions and hot dog their way into the end zone like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. It's hard to find the Willie Sneads and the Seth Roberts and even the Miles Boykins of the world that are like, hell, man, I'll go block that guy for 4 quarters. I don't care. I'm going to go beat that guy. You're not going to get top-notch receivers that are going to be difference makers that are also willing to block. Those are just 2 things that don't come with receivers. So it's not that big of a need to me because I just don't think you're going to get guys like that can do what you already have on this roster that are blocked so well on the outside.
So we'll kind of wrap this up with a couple final questions for you, Sarah. The first one was, who do you think is the biggest threat to the Ravens if they make the Super Bowl? We've seen a lot of top seeds like the Saints already knocked out. The Patriots are knocked out. So I guess I could include the Kansas City Chiefs in here in a fact just that they could potentially meet up with the Ravens in the AFC Championship. But looking more towards on the NFC side, if you're the Ravens and you make the Super Bowl, who is the one team that you would not want to face?
Yeah, I agree with you that if we're talking about AFC, NFC, I think the Chiefs – I mean, it's the only team Lamar has played and has not beaten, and he's played them twice. On the NFC, I think I'm still going with the 49ers, even though It's so weird to be in this position to be so confident. You know, the Ravens are always the underdog. I have a lot of confidence that the Ravens could beat any of the NFC teams. And I actually think that in Miami, given that there's no rain, I think that the Ravens could play even better against the 49ers than they did the first time. I think, the rain really affected Lamar Jackson more than it affected Jimmy Garoppolo, if you look at their numbers from previous games. So I think the 49ers are still the biggest threat. I mean, that was a heavyweight just brawl. It was a great game. It would be the 49ers' second time. I still have confidence that the Ravens would win it, but I'd say 49ers would be the biggest threat from the NFC.
Yeah, I was at that game, and you had to wear like a little literal trash bag if you were in the stands watching that game. So I can't imagine what it was like to be on the field. Dave, we talked about this a little bit before too, but same question goes to you. If you're the Ravens, what's the team you don't want to face?
Well, since Sarah talked about the Niners already, I had said for weeks it was the Saints because I thought the Saints could match them offensively. Since Sarah talked so well about the Niners, you'll probably look at me sideways. It would be the Packers, would be the second team out of the NFC that I'm not sure if I want to play because Ravens have their issues with big-time quarterbacks. And I know Aaron Rodgers isn't having that year, but there's always in that back of your mind whenever you play the Packers, oh, God, this could be the game that Aaron Rodgers throws for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, and you're out of the game by halftime. So that would kind of worry me. Outside of that, the Vikings don't scare me. Seahawks don't scare me. I think that's it. Yeah. So those three don't really scare me. The Niners are the biggest threat, with the Packers being number 2.
Yeah, to me, it's the Chiefs. I know we're talking about NFC teams, but just on the AFC side, even in Baltimore, the 2 losses that Lamar's had to them have been close games, but the Ravens haven't been able to get over that hump yet. So I have a feeling that that's going to be the rematch next week we're talking about for the AFC Championship game. But to wrap everything up here, 2 things we wanted to ask you, Sarah. This question was from Dave. Obviously, from all your time with the Ravens, he wanted to know kind of either your best story or your memory during the time with the team, and then we can make our final score predictions going into Saturday night.
I mean, it's so many to choose from. I mean, you're there for 13 years. I mean, what people say about it being a first-class organization, I mean, I can say that from the person who sits, in a cubicle. It's not just the football side and the coaching side. I mean, I have so many stories of coworkers that nobody knows about, and I'm sure people want to hear stories from bigger people, so I'll go that route. But really, my boss was phenomenal. My coworkers were phenomenal. It's funny. I had my third baby. I came home from the hospital with her on the divisional game in Denver, Miracle Mile High. And I was so bummed that she came a little bit early because, I wanted to go to the Super Bowl. And they were doing a charter flight for everybody to go down there and work. And they still took me and my entire family, chartered me down there, put me with the hotel room with all the other coworkers to work it, even though I was on maternity leave. So I basically got to do all the fun stuff and didn't have to do any of the work. The most probably emotional was my last day. The Ravens allowed me to bring my whole family. My last day was August 1st, 2018. So Lamar Jackson had just been drafted. It's training camp. And it is a media frenzy out there. And if you know anything about Ozzie Newsome, he hates the media, right? I had limited interaction with him. I did one interview with him for Man of the Crowd, just personal interviews. Obviously, I was at all the press conferences and whatnot. But I'm sitting there and everybody's coming up for, you guys know, the pressers, and I'm there next to all the media. It's just everybody screaming out for autographs. And I feel a tap on my shoulder and I turn around and it's Ozzie Newsome. And I had no idea that he even knew it was my last day. And he, in the middle of this massive crowd that he doesn't want to be in the middle of, gives me the biggest bear hug and wishes me all the best in the world. And that was just like a culmination of this is a classy organization. I mean, who am I at the Ravens organization? This is Ozzie Newsome, a Hall of Famer. Somehow he took it upon himself to know it was my last day, found me in the middle of a crowd, and wished me the best. This is a first-class organization, top to bottom, and I was so proud to have worked with them for 13 years.
That's awesome. And from the outside view, we hear about it. We hear from the beat reporters who are there every week, and to hear those kind of stories, I think just reiterate just everything the Ravens embody. And I think we're very lucky, especially to have Ozzie and that stability for all those years, and then Eric DeCosta to take over for that as well. And just going into everything to kind of wrap this up, Sarah, what's your score prediction for Saturday night against the Titans?
I'm going to go 27-17, maybe 30-17. I have a ton of respect for the Titans, but even with Henry putting up 182 yards, they only put up 14 points against the Patriots. I just don't think they have the firepower to keep up with the Ravens. So 27-17.
Dave, what do you got?
I'll go 20-10 because I think you take Derrick Henry away, Tennessee gets a garbage time touchdown. I just if they don't have the play action, nothing works in that offense. So if they can take Derrick Henry away, Ravens will roll. If not, I'll be sweating for 3.5 hours Saturday night.
I got Ravens 28, Titans 17. Sarah, I promised I didn't copy you. I had this written down before, but
liar.
No, I think the Titans will stick around. They are a good team, and they've definitely gotten a lot of credit this week for how well they played under Mike Vrabel this season. But I think the Ravens are going to be too much. The rust factor doesn't worry me. I really don't care about that. I think the Ravens are too talented to overcome a narrative like that. But I think we all believe the Ravens are going to be the AFC Championship come next week. It's going to be very exciting. And Dave, you want to wrap us up here, but Sarah, first of all, it was great to have you on, and I think we'll definitely need you to have you on again, but it was a pleasure for sure.
Happy to be here. I'm happy for you guys. I know this is a new venture for both of you. Best of luck to both of you. I know you're off to a great start.
All right. Sarah, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Joe and I will be back next week. We have another great guest lined up. We'll tease that out. We don't want to fire all the bullets in our caliber right now, so we'll save that for right now. But our thanks to Sarah Ellison. For Joe Schiller, I'm Dave Steinwettel. We hope to be talking to you about the AFC Championship game next week. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you then.